Welcome to the Leaders in Housing Counseling call for March 16th. Glad you are all on the call. We're having a great turnout and appreciate the participation and the interest in all that we're working on. What we're going to do very quickly, we're going to dive in because we have a crowded agenda, so we're going to give some quick updates on what's happening on the federal scene, and then we're going to pivot directly to our topic, which is the opportunities that are being created through the counseling certification rule and how it may create opportunities for local counseling agencies. We have Sarah Jarique from the Office of Housing at HUD, who we all know and appreciate our role in all this. She'll give a HUD oversight overview of all this, and then we'll have a panel of 4 practitioners who are doing it right now, and they're going to give us their very high-level rapid fire. These are the things that have worked for us and what we've learned. We'll have a little bit of time for question and answer, and hopefully this will be useful to everyone. This is, you know what, let's get started. Let's move in, and then I'll make a little bit more introduction. So Matthew, so we got the housing counseling funding letter out. How'd it go?
It went very well, and thanks to everyone. I'm sure many of the people on the call signed on. It was signed by just about 350 agencies. Went out last week to every congressional office. Our ask was for $60 million for the HUD Housing Counseling Assistance Program. We also heard from a number of people who sent letters directly to their members of Congress. Some folks did their own letters, which were really helpful. So I think we made a good showing, asking members of Congress to support funding for housing counseling assistance.
So, and I would just add to that there's still time to do those individual letters, and the idea is that it's getting into the programmatic request that the House and Senate member makes to appropriations. Very, very important that we get as many places asking, as many people asking as possible, and that really the only way this gets generated is by local requests from your from you to your people. Very important to do it for Republicans as well as Democrats, independents, and then so doing it now would be really helpful. And if you have the energy to follow it up with a phone call, this is all crucial to keeping our programs alive.
So, and just one other point is that members have to submit their requests by, I think it's April 7th. It's like the first week of April. So it's, you know, certainly they're going to be developing them well in advance of that. So as soon as possible, if you are planning to send something.
Good. So and then budget.
The other thing we just wanted to touch on quickly is folks probably saw that the administration released their so-called skinny budget today. It was very skinny, only about 60 pages in total. The HUD section included just like 6 bullet points. Just some real high-level things to mention. So the budget would cut HUD funding by $6.2 billion, which is about 13%. It would eliminate important programs to many people on this call: CDBG, Home, Choice Neighborhoods. They also only in the budget they only account for $4.1 billion of the 6.2. So that leaves another $2+ billion in cuts that they don't say exactly where those would come from. Outside of the HUD budget, it also would eliminate funding for NeighborWorks, for legal services, and a number of other programs. Just one kind of more positive note is that there's 2 things that would need to happen for this budget, and for both of those they would need 60 votes, so they would need Democrats to go along with it. They would have to lift the budget caps that are in place now, which they couldn't do without some Democratic votes. And just to pass any budget, they're going to appropriations bills, they're going to need Democrats. So this is very much just, you know, the administration outlining their priorities, but there's a lot of work to be done by the Congress before you know, before any HUD bill passes. I don't know if you want to add anything, Bruce.
Well, I mean, just the very initial thing that we are hearing is that in the Republican side, we are hearing people, moderate Republicans, who are saying that this is just impossible to do in the HUD budget, and that you know, so while this is a very aggressive attack on very important programs, as Matthew said, there's a lot more groundwork to do. And there is support for NeighborWorks in the majority in the House and Senate among some people, and there's certainly deep support for CDBG in Republican and Democratic jurisdictions. I mean, there's lots of places where we will have, I think, strong pushback opportunities that would be bipartisan and be valuable, and part of the reason I'm here in DC today. The one other thing I'd add on the list of something that got eliminated was CDFI funding, so it's an important piece to our work. But, you know, plenty more to go. This is certainly, President's budgets have been ignored a lot in the past, and there'll be a lot of difficult work to do in the future, but it's not this is just the beginning of all this. So don't want to be too discouraging. Okay, Matthew, any more on that?
No, that's all.
Good. So we'll be deeply involved in all this. Let's turn to the panel here, and here's the context, which I think we mentioned before, but this year we're going to focus a lot in our leaders' calls and maybe some separate webinars if it's needed on creating opportunities and funding streams and new lines of business that will be that will allow counseling agencies to kind of pivot and not be so reliant on funding from the federal government. And the idea is that we need to really think about what those other businesses are, and big thanks to NeighborWorks, who's really helped us coordinate on bringing in a bunch of different conversations. A couple that are coming up that you should know about. One will be with the good people at the CDC of Brownsville. They have developed an alternative to payday loans, which is, I think, very innovative and easily adopted by other organizations. We'll also have the Nationwide Mortgage Collaborative, which is a platform for originating mortgages, and particularly mortgages that counselors work with, and counseling agencies will be paid for the work that they do, both of which will both of which are income generating opportunities. Those are coming up in April and May. But let's dive into the panel today. So the opportunity is that that the new counseling regulations will, the new counseling certification rule will create some opportunities, because there'll be agencies that currently are doing things that look like housing counseling, but they are not HUD approved and they would not have HUD certified counselors, and so either they need to come up to speed or it may make more sense for them to outsource this. So the idea is, let's figure out what those opportunities are, and we'll talk with some practitioners who have already been doing this pre the rule, to just see what lessons they've got to learn. But first, we're very pleased to have Sarah Jarrique with us today, Deputy Assistant Secretary from the Office of Housing Counseling. And Sarah, please give us HUD's perspective on all this.
Well, thank you, Bruce and Matthew, and I'm excited to hear from the panelists as well. I wanted to share with you on the phone the aspects of certification that you may not have been focused on. So if you'll go to the next slide, Matthew, I want to cover certification, but not in the sense of what you as a housing counselor need to know. We've done that. If you have questions about that, we can do it again. I did that in January with this group. But instead about housing counselor certification, and in particular its effect on other programs, especially programs that are not in the HUD approved network right now, and how that may be an opportunity for you who are in the HUD network. And then we'll touch on resources and other information. And I'm going to go pretty fast because I want to hear from the panelists as much as you do. Next slide, please. So actually 2 slides. So housing counselor certification, what you need to know in this context. The Federal Register language is important, and actually much of the commentary, the preamble, and the rule itself actually addresses how certification affects programs outside of the HUD counseling program. Just as an aside, I'll say that We have not published a Federal Register notice to announce the availability of the exam. We are planning to do that, and you should watch for it. And the final compliance date for counselor certification will be 36 months after the exam is available. There are some minor things that are effective immediately. We won't talk about those today. So next slide. I always like to start with why the heck are we doing certification? And I should add, in the context of the budget and the change of administration, that the administration leadership here at HUD is very well aware of certification efforts, has been very supportive of our outreach efforts. And I don't know what will happen in the budget, but I do feel that these efforts are, at least, we've certainly given every indication to continue in our work. The benefits of certification are many, but the lower left corner in green is the one I want to talk about. It was a clear direction from Congress as part of this statute that housing counseling should mean one thing nationally if it's supported by HUD, and that one thing is standards that are set by the Office of Housing Counseling that all of you meet today as HUD-approved housing counseling agencies. So if you go to the next slide, the key provision of the regulation that I want to focus on are two. The first is that all counseling provided under or in connection with any HUD program must be performed by a HUD certified counselor. And second, that a HUD certified counselor is someone who's passed the exam and works for a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. This statutory language is a vision that any counseling provided under or in connection with any program of HUD is going to have to be delivered by HUD-approved housing counseling agencies and counselors working for them. So that's the baseline information I want to work with. So you see a couple key terms of art in there. Let's start with the first one, Matthew, housing counseling. So you all know what housing counseling is, but we have to define it in the final rule because other programs are going to start to be affected by this. And the definition on the screen is what is the language in the final rule. Housing counseling is independent, expert advice, customized to the needs of the consumer, et cetera, and must include certain elements. Next slide. And the process elements are an intake, a budget, an analysis of their financial capability and housing affordability, an action plan, referrals, and reasonable follow-up. None of this should be a surprise to you. And if it is a surprise, please send me a question because we're not doing a good enough job. But this is exactly what HUD reviews for the agencies that are in our program now. We're very proud of it, and a surprisingly large amount of this is actually based in statute. We don't make it up here at HUD. Next slide, please. What becomes interesting is what's not housing counseling. And so the certification rule includes a number of things that aren't housing counseling. If you're just doing information and referral, well, let me back up. I want you to put your head around not being a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, but being a public housing authority, another nonprofit that does HUD work, and you're wondering, well, now do I suddenly have to become a certified counselor, or do I have to have an arrangement with a HUD-approved counseling agency? So these exclusions become very important in that context. Information and referral, giving somebody a list of affordable housing or giving them basic information about fair housing, something, is not housing counseling. Intake is not housing counseling. Determining if somebody is eligible for subsidized housing or a loan is not housing counseling. Holistic case management is not housing counseling. Fair housing advocacy is not housing counseling, again, for purposes of certification. And group education, giving information to people without individualized services, is not housing counseling. Next slide. I want to dive deep a little into group education because a lot of groups do financial literacy classes. They'll do a session on home ownership at a senior center. And the distinction for us is that group education is not customized. It's information delivered at people. It's not a dialogue that offers individual financial analysis or an action plan. If you are a HUD-approved counseling agency and you're offering group education as one of your services and reporting it on the 9902, then yes, it is regulated by us. The certified counselor must oversee the group education. But if it's not housing counseling and you happen to be educating people, that doesn't automatically trip you into the certification requirement. Next slide, please. So what are these other HUD programs that may be affected and how might they be affected? Next slide. Different organizations can be affected by the certification rule. And these are organizations that touch any HUD program. So state and local governments, public housing authorities, HFAs, CHODOs, and other nonprofits and government agencies could very well be affected by the counselor certification requirement. Next slide. And programs can be affected. So there are 4 categories of programs. HUD programs where housing counseling is required is affected. So if CDBG, I'm sorry, well, I'll save examples for a minute. One category is whether housing counseling is required by the HUD program. The second is whether the HUD program is used to fund housing counseling. The third is if housing counseling is required by a subgrantee as a condition of assistance under a HUD program. And the fourth category is a HUD program where the family assistant is referred to housing counseling by the grantee or subgrantee. So those are the 4 situations where housing counseling may be, the certification rule may be triggered. Next slide. Let me give you some examples where programs and entities will be affected by the certification rule. And affected means that the housing counseling done will have to be done by a HUD certified housing counselor working for a HUD approved counseling agency 36 months from the time the test is available. So the home program is a real basic example. If an entity is using home funds to build home units or is using it for down payment assistance, home requires in its regulation home ownership counseling, and that counseling, when the rule is effective, will have to be done by a HUD approved housing counselor. Next slide. CDBG. If the city or state uses CDBG or disaster recovery funding to fund housing counseling directly or they're on granting it, all of that housing counseling has to be done by HUD-approved counseling agencies and HUD-certified counselors 3 years from now. The CDBG is used for down payment assistance and housing counseling is required. This certification rule is going to require that that counseling be done by a HUD-approved agency and a HUD-certified counselor. I'm going to give a couple more examples and then I'll stop. So next slide. I used to call this Section 8 to home ownership. Home ownership counseling is required. It will have to be done by a HUD-certified counselor. The public authority who is hosting the program has to either become HUD-approved agency itself or it can partner with a HUD-approved agency. And that's going to be true for all of these entities affected by the rule. Next slide. There are many other programs that could be affected. Family self-sufficiency, for example, has family self-sufficiency coordinators, sometimes in 811 or 202 projects, who are permitted to provide homeownership counseling. And if they are doing that, then it's going to have to be a HUD-approved agency. ESG has a number of eligible uses of funds. This is emergency shelter grants. Emergency Solutions Grant. See, I'm old. I know the old name. Housing counseling is eligible, so if the entity chooses to use the funds for housing counseling, the counselor has to be certified. But in programs like HOPWA and ESG, holistic case management, where you happen to be helping people with their housing issues as well as other issues, is not going to be housing counseling for purposes of this rule. What I like to say is that if the program is calling it housing counseling, using it for housing counseling, require it for housing counseling, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, capital H, capital C, then that housing counseling is going to have to be delivered by a HUD certified counselor working for a HUD approved agency. Next slide. Organizations that are just funders, such as states or CDBG entities, for example, that on grant, will not have to become HUD approved entities themselves. It's only the entity that is actually doing the direct service that will have to become HUD certified and be a HUD approved agency. So the next slide. So the agencies that are going to be impacted for this, and you will have a lot of real world examples, as will the panel, but let's take, for example, a city that is using its CDBG funds today for housing counseling and is giving the money to some are HUD approved agencies and some are not. An agency like that will have 4 choices. They're a grantee, they grant the money, so they're not providing direct service themselves in this example. They could require that their subgrantees all become HUD approved, and they could tell the ones that are not HUD approved today that they should become HUD approved by the time the grant round comes up when the rule is effective. So they can grant to HUD approved agencies or affiliates. They could partner with HUD approved housing counseling agencies, and that's really the topic today. There's a huge opportunity for existing housing counseling agencies to partner with the entities who are affected by this aspect of the rule through agreements, and many of these sources of funds are eligible to be used as for contract basis for services such as this. They can modify their program to be compliant. In the example I gave, they could change their CDBG allocation plan to only fund housing counseling agencies that are HUD approved. Or they can stop delivering housing counseling services altogether and say, I don't want to do this, and we're going to drop housing counseling from our plan, which would be tragic. So there are 2 roles really that I think are very important for today's HUD approved agencies. One is to outreach. It's very hard for us to make sure that the public housing agencies, government entities are aware that this new requirement exists. And second, to offer them a solution. I've met with a number of cities who are very interested in complying. They understand why this is coming out. They think it's a good idea, but they're trying to decide, well, does the city of Irvington, Texas put its staff through a HUD approval process and become HUD approved itself? Or should it work to build the capacity of the entities in its jurisdiction so that it can on-grant to them? And that's a conversation that we would love to see you have early on. I'm going to address one more issue. You can scroll through the last slides, Matthew. I think everyone has seen them before. They're resources that we have available to answer questions about certification. Let me just raise the elephant in the room. If HUD, the president is successful and zeroes out home and CDBG, does this all really matter? And I would say that the principle of housing counseling supported by HUD being done through HUD-approved agencies is not likely to go away, that many of these programs will continue, and that while this may not be the first priority for entities that are looking at a total funding cut, many of them, in my experience, do get it and like the idea of thinking about a capacity and a more rigorous service delivery, frankly, we also bring a lot of cost savings for these entities. If you are contracting with an entity to do the family self-sufficiency review, for example, services, for example, then HUD stands behind you in the quality of services you deliver when we come out to do the performance review. And that's one less oversight burden that that PHA or local government entity does not have to worry about. So there's a lot of benefit that you can bring and a lot of benefit overall to the consumer who we can start to promote housing counseling, and it'll mean one thing if HUD touches it in any way, rather than being done to some standards in some places and other standards in other places. So with that, I'm going to welcome your questions at the end, but I think it would be great to hear examples of what these partnerships look like today, because there are some wonderful opportunities that groups have developed, and I'll turn it back over to Matthew and Bruce.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So let's dive right in, and we have four practitioners who are deeply immersed in this. So let's start with Karen Nigel from Housing Education Resource Center in Hartford. Karen.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to connect with my colleagues. It's great. Just a brief background. I'm the Assistant Director of the Housing Education Resource Center in Hartford, Connecticut, or HERC as we're known. And we've been providing housing, education, and counseling to the small state of Connecticut since 1980. And we have been a HUD-approved housing counseling agency since the late 1990s. We are also a sub-grantee of the New England-based Citizens Housing and Planning Association in Boston, so I want to give a shout out to my great intermediary. And in actuality, HERC has a long-established relationship with a variety of entities, and including area towns. And we have established that, for decades. So I'm just speaking from that perspective. And now as we're reaching out to other area towns, we are making sure that our services include counseling for home buyers using local down payment programs, closing assistance programs, to specific rental counseling of any resident of Connecticut. As far as towns, we've always raised awareness of the benefits of housing counseling, specifically by HUD-certified agencies, and we certainly emphasize our commitment to the national industry standards for homeownership education and counseling. That is very, very impressive for towns. We approach town mayors' offices, we approach town managers, we approach town fair housing officers, and town social service departments when we explain our services and how residents can benefit from these specialized housing services. Look, most town departments and many agencies that are not specialized in providing housing services are bombarded by so many family and other issues, and the staff there just cannot possibly delve into the specifics of housing issues with their clients. And so they welcome us as a relief and as a referral to provide the in-depth counseling that housing counseling agencies provide. So we're seen actually as a relief for them. And it's so true for other agencies that handle other types of cases that they can kind of hand off some of the more detailed problematic situations. And not necessarily always problematic. Certainly, as I said, many towns and entities who are providing down payment assistance and have special homeownership programs certainly tap into us, and we develop contracts and sometimes just memorandums of understanding to provide these services. So that's something that certainly we do specific outreach. And, because it is a relatively small state, we do get a lot of information through word of mouth that people are interested and entities are interested, towns, private companies at times want to have our services provided specifically to their residents or their clients, sometimes even being used as a referral service from employment assistance programs as well. So we provide, the soup to nuts of housing counseling, from home ownership to rental and or tenant counseling, and also foreclosure prevention. So all of these agreements can be chiseled out with the variety of entities, but certainly outreach is very important, and a very good relationship to build upon. So, and that's, I just encourage every housing counseling agency to start thinking in a broad perspective, and to look at different ways where you can promote your services, and maybe even develop, a streamline of various income coming in from those sources. So
excellent. And I think it's very, I think that's great, excellent. It's very helpful, Karen. And I think this idea that it's not, many of these organizations are based in cities, that to be reaching out to smaller towns and to county governments, if you have county governments, those are all opportunities as well. Very helpful. Let's move quickly to Marcus Purnell from Home for USA. Marcus works in Atlanta and has quite extensive government contracting going on. Marcus?
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to share a stream of, I would say, income that allows us to really not only help a couple of our local housing authorities, but also help the stability of our organization as well. We work currently with a couple of housing authorities here in the Atlanta and Atlanta metro area when it comes to the development and management of their home ownership program. Pretty much just like when we're working with everyone else that is looking to purchase a home, we focus on our credit advisement and our budget counseling. We will work with these individuals on a one-on-one private experience. We also provide them with the information they need to be successful. Sorry about that. We also look to partner when it comes to home buyer. I'm having to relocate for a second. Sorry about that. So I was covering the our home ownership program with local housing authorities. We actually work with 2 local housing authorities in our area. We help them when it comes to their education and making sure that the people are mortgage ready. Sorry about that. Trying to find a quiet place.
Marcus, why don't we pause with you, have Walter jump in, and we'll come back to you. How's that?
Please, I appreciate it. Yeah.
I get it. It happens to all of us. So, Walda Yon, who's with the Latino Economic Development Center in Washington, D.C., and another deep practitioner in working with local governments. Walda?
Yes, thank you, Bruce. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experience with the agencies that are participating in the call today. So as you said, the Latino Economic Development Center is a nonprofit organization. We are located in Washington, D.C., and also we have an office in Wheaton, Maryland. And our experience is LEDC has been working with the community since 1991, providing housing counseling and also small business technical assistance. So LEDC also is a CDFI approved. But regarding the housing counseling program, we provide housing counseling, and our contract with the local government in Washington, D.C. is as a agency that provides the intake service for the down payment assistance in the city. So Washington, D.C. has a very good down payment assistance, and it requires the housing counseling portion. We also, in the contract, include, in the most recent years, we include financial capability counseling in the contract. So that's other area that they have provided funding to be able to provide the services. And education in a group setting and individual counseling. With the Maryland government, we were able to get this contract probably 7 years ago, because we were able to share with them the successful services that we were providing to the Washington community since 1991. So we were able to get funding and to open an office with them, also to provide foreclosure prevention and first-time home buyer, and most recently financial capability services. I would say that that has been a very successful relationship for LEDC. They have seen that the services that we provide to the community, helping them to improve their financial health, is a very good benefit for them as government. When the individuals apply for the down payment assistance program, we make sure that they are going to be able to be mortgage ready once they receive the assistance. I would say that once we demonstrate the service and the benefits for them, has been really easy to continue with that relationship. Another source of income that we have is with Freddie Mac to provide financial capability counseling. We have probably a relationship with them of 8 years, working in this other area of financial capability. So those are the sources that LEDC is managing right now regarding income and the relationships that we have with government. We are exploring to expand our services with the Baltimore City in Maryland, and we are ready to share with them all the benefits that we can bring to their community.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much, Walda. Andrew, are you with us here? And Andrew LeBaire, who's with the Community Reinvestment Solutions. Andrew's a longtime veteran in the housing and housing counseling field. Andrew, you there?
I sure am. Thank you.
Okay, great.
A couple of organizations I'm working with right now. One is in South Florida, and we've got kind of an interesting relationship with one of the local government funding sources called MDEET, and they provide a down payment assistance of $7,500 for Miami-Dade County residents, of which, and then another $250 fee, and that fee is paid to just a handful of approved housing counseling agencies, of which my organization is one. And that's been a regular source of revenue income for some time. And it's important to note how that came about. It came about with having, the CEO of the organization involved politically. And as these new down payment programs came about, he was involved in the committees that created them. He was involved with the governing board at one point, etc. And the lead program person is on the board of my organization that I'm working with. These types of relationships are critical as we talk about how do we establish fee-paying relationships with local government. It takes more than just knocking on somebody's door and saying, hey, this is what we do, we're HUD certified, etc. It also takes involvement with local government. If you're asked to serve on a committee, asked to serve on, say, a CDBG or a home advisory committee, this is a great inroad to the city staff that'll be making those decisions to contract with you. So I just wanted to touch base on the value of that. But one example is, fee-for-service with MDEAT down in Miami. Another example is the bond issuing organizations. Typically, they might be the state HFA. Here in Arizona, where I reside, there's 5 different mortgage revenue bond issuers. And not all of them require housing counseling for a mortgage revenue bond, where you've got, the down payment assistance built into the pricing as it's sold into the market. One of the things that we look at here in Arizona from a counseling standpoint is who does those requirements, who sits on those boards, so that we can talk to them about making that a requirement. And as early as probably 1995, NHS Phoenix was the first to get an agreement with the Maricopa County Industrial Development Authority to do fee-for-service housing counseling. And that was way before, the current environment of housing counseling. But the chair of that board was a close friend of our executive director at the time. And it's those local relationships, again, that can turn into these paying programs. So the mortgage revenue bonds is one way, and it's not necessarily the lender that's originating the loan. That's not where the decision comes from as to who provides the housing counseling. It's the bond issuer themselves. But that's another source of income. Another thing that we've done, again, in Arizona or in Phoenix, the NHS has, for several years, had a relationship with the City of Phoenix Housing. When somebody comes in and they have a loan that's held by the City of Phoenix, maybe it's an NSP loan or a CDBG or home type loan, where the loan sits on the books of the city, and that person, whether it's amortizing or forgivable or whatever the circumstances of that loan, they're seeking to refinance their house. And they need to have that particular loan subordinated. The city actually pays a fee to the NHS to provide that review. I don't know if that program is in place now, but for several years it was in place. And they were paying $100 for the NHS to do that review and make a recommendation to allow subordination or not. Of course, that recommendation was based on the guidelines set by the city and by the funding source program, say the home program. But it gave a unique opportunity to make sure that, A, predatory lenders weren't, encouraging cash out refinances that were not in the best interest of that homeowner. And it also allowed for an assurance that the program itself, whatever that funding source was being adhered to by the city. So there's multiple values to have a local housing counseling organization play that third-party review role to allow subordination of those loans. Lastly, I want to just talk about the fact that today's focus is on government relationships and fee-for-service, but we shouldn't forget that more and more we're seeing certain community home products, whether they're portfolio loans by the banks or Fannie Freddie type loans, that are requiring housing counseling. And this is a unique opportunity for agencies to seek local or national contracts to, again, provide fee-for-service. Bear in mind, if you do that, there might be a RESPA implication. Often, the lender might require that there be a disclosure on the loan disclosure because it's a fee related to that loan. So if you're going to have that dialogue, don't forget the RESPA implications and the necessary disclosure and reporting to assist the lender with that fact. But those are 3 ways that I can that I've been a part of where we've seen fee-for-service for good counseling services and home buyer education. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andrew. Very helpful. And we're doing some work on the RESPA issues as well, and there'll be more reported on calls in the future about this. Let's see if we can get Marcus Purnell back on again. Marcus, are you settled and able to proceed?
Yes, I'm back. Thank you. I
good.
appreciate the time. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I want to bring to your attention an opportunity to work with housing authorities in your local areas. You'll find that most of the housing authorities in your areas may offer a homeownership component for their housing choice voucher recipients. Some people are actually this time of year, getting tax refunds back and really trying to leverage their situation credit-wise or savings-wise, and simply need our help to become homeowners. So what we offer are one-on-one private advisement sessions. We also break down the educational component. Many organizations usually offer 8-hour trainings. We try and break ours down into 90 minutes. We offer them on some evenings, some Saturday mornings, and it gives people a chance to really focus and understand what it is that they're receiving when you're giving them valuable information. Some programs you'll find when it comes to the housing authorities, they actually will make the voucher instead of a rental voucher. They'll actually allow that voucher to continue and help them with the mortgage payment, which is a strong component. And so the number one, I would say, goal of the program is to build self-sufficiency and to help that voucher recipient achieve self-sufficiency. In our local area, we usually utilize a couple of programs. One offers up to $10,000 in down payment assistance. Another one offers up to $25,000 in down payment assistance. And we really try to do the best job possible to allow these housing choice voucher recipients to, again, leverage that money and be able to become a homeowner. As many of you all know, the houses are not getting any cheaper as America continues to recover in our housing market. So this is an opportunity that we've actually serviced probably for the past, probably going on about 9 or 10 years now. And it's done wonders for our local organization here at Home for USA. And if I can answer any questions that you all may have, I'd definitely like to.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So, Matthew, have we got some questions in the queue?
We have just a handful of questions, and most of them are more kind of generally about the certification rule. There is one that's kind of more about today's topic, so I'll start with that. So someone asked about a state HFA program that requires online education that doesn't meet HUD guidelines. So I think this is in the context of, Sarah, when you were explaining when agencies would be required to work with a counseling agency.
So HFAs and many, so as you hear just on the panel, there are down payment assistance programs all over the place, and they may or may not require HUD standards. For a legal requirement, the certification rule will require that if the source of funds is or the driver is in connection with or funded by a HUD program, then the counseling will have to meet HUD standards. However, HFAs fund their down payment assistance and their mortgages from a lot of different sources. If you have an HFA that is paying for is requiring education, for example, that doesn't meet HUD standards, and the HFA is generating the loans from its own mortgage revenue bonds, and HUD doesn't touch that HFA, then they will not be affected by this rule, and they can continue doing whatever the heck they like. If, however, and many HFAs actually use CDBG to pay for some of the education and counseling, or they might use home, or they may combine funds rather than using their own reserves or their own funding, then the requirement would be tripped. I think it's an opportunity to talk to the HFA either way. We're going to be changing the view of housing counseling. We're putting quite a bit of awareness and visibility, I hope, into the value of HUD-approved housing counseling. And if nothing else, this may be an opportunity to have a conversation with them to say, maybe you want to consider going this direction. But it's only required if they are doing it in connection with a program of HUD.
And HUD has been doing some education on this issue to housing authorities and local governments, right?
yes, we're doing outreach. We've hit a number of conferences. In fact, we would welcome suggestions for groups that are meeting where we could get the word out more, because there are really hundreds of municipalities and public housing agencies that need to know. So we're a little bit asking for your help with that. But yes, we have a pretty full plate this spring of outreach at conferences and other venues.
So the timing is good for local agencies to talk to local institutions about this opportunity. And obviously, if we anything more to spread the word would be helpful as well. Matthew, do we have other questions?
Yeah, we've had a few more come in.
Okay.
Someone asked for, this is for everyone, were all the programs that you talked about fee-for-service? If so, could you talk about how you arrived at the fee-for-service rate?
This is Karen Nigel from Hartford. We have a mix of agreements, and some of which is that, for example, in towns, whatever the source of their funding would be, they do make a contribution to our organization, and we look at what percentage of the budget it is, and we service a certain amount of people for that contribution to our agency. So, you know, it takes on different forms, and some of the services, we've done some housing mobility services as a fee for service, and you know, some relocation advisory services, and certainly if they have any HUD funding involved. Luckily, some of the entities that we've worked with have been a little more progressive and have always used us as a housing certified housing counseling agency. So there's a variety of ways that we do receive the funding to do what services each entity would like us to do.
And I'm gonna jump in, and we're gonna lose Sarah in 3 minutes, and we've got one other question for her and a comment, so we'll just do those quickly, and then maybe we can come back to other folks on how they set the fee. So just a comment for you, Sarah, is talking points on the value of homebuyer training and counseling would be very helpful. This person says they're currently doing some of it, but just want to make sure that they're quoting the studies correctly and giving credit where due. And then the question for you is, how does the requirement for a HUD-certified counselor to oversee homeownership education apply in cases where online education is used?
Very good question. The requirement on oversight is that we expect the counselor to actually look at the curriculum of the online, confirm that it meets HUD requirements in their view, as well as whatever that agency is looking for. And our requirements, as you know, are mostly around content standards and delivery standards in education. And periodically check and make sure that, for example, the offer that counseling is offered in the same topic by the agency is met. So a note to file from the counselor showing the oversight or review of content and delivery would be what we are looking for. We are going to provide more information around that going forward, but that would be the idea. I just want to add a note on the funding, and then I'll turn back to the panel and look forward to the other questions as well. Many of these funding sources for public housing, family self-sufficiency, CDBG, and home allow counseling as an eligible cost. They allow capacity building if agencies have to get up to speed on a new business model. They allow administrative funds to be used to pay fee-for-service. It can be very difficult to navigate the rules. Please send us, look at our FAQs online. We address eligible costs that we know of. And if you have questions as you're actually getting into negotiating agreement, please send them to us, because we can work with our contacts here to try to clarify what the rules are for using, for example, part of the CDBG grant to fund the fee-for-service. I do apologize for having to leave for another meeting, and I'll look forward to I want to thank the panel myself because it's very informative for me. Thank you.
Thanks
Great,
very
thanks,
much, Sarah.
Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is specifically for Marcus. Could you just talk a little bit about how you got started with your local housing authority?
Yeah, actually, we had noticed that a group that wasn't really giving a lot of attention to their program, we're watching them actually get the contract for a couple of years, and we just set up a meeting at the Housing Authority and asked when there will be another RFP coming out involving their program, and we were just wondering if they were really satisfied with the growth of their program. And they went through a leadership change not too long after that meeting, and they opened it back up to organizations to write in for it, and we answered the RFP.
Yeah, I think so I think we're going to be in two kinds of environments for these. This is actually exactly what people need to be thinking about. So one is where it's an open RFP program. The other one may be where a housing authority is providing services themselves, and we may need to suggest that outsourcing may be a more economical solution for them.
Yes.
Great. Matthew, got
All right.
one more question you can squeeze in or so?
There are a few, but they're for Sarah specifically, and they're just kind of
Okay.
general questions
So
on
let
the
me just ask,
certification.
so let me throw out one more thing to the group then, which is how would you frame this to the local governments? How would you make the pitch in a way that resonates for them? I mean, I think we know what we do well, but on the other hand, it's sort of from the government's perspective. How would you make a pitch that would be effective?
Well, I would say, this is Karen Nigel, I would say that we are directly dealing with and solving many other constituents' issues, and without, if they were to take on extra staff to deal with these, that would be much more costly for them. And that certainly, some of our contributors, as Marcus brought up, leveraging is very important. Leveraging funds from a variety of sources is very important. So, you have to always look at the cost effectiveness of our services as compared to the entity providing the service themselves. And they certainly, have to look at what's a HUD certified activity. And it's a good point that Sarah brought up, as well as you really should be checking through HUD to see what's an approved fee for service versus what, make sure there are no conflicts in the regulations, and that's something that Sarah can provide as well.
So a couple of talking points, and this is Andrew. One is, as HUD mandates more and more certified counseling services, and the municipalities and government sources they don't have the certified staff, is emphasizes cheaper to contract with the local agency than it is to pay the money it takes to have one of their staff certified. You guys have already made the investment. The municipal governments have not. So you're saving them money plus time, because the HUD certified counselors and the agencies can immediately affect that requirement that's being imposed more and more with HUD funding. And so that's a key piece. It's all about money. It's cheaper to pay you to do it than it is to have a city staffer do it, or a county staff, or whomever. And that's one of the key talking points. And work out the money. And this circles back around to, how do you justify whatever fee you charge? You also look back at, what does it cost to have a city staffer do it versus an agency do it? And look at the volume of people that municipal funding source serves. Do the math and figure out how much it would really cost them to have a $40,000 a year staffer do it versus having you as an agency do it. If they only, work with, say, 30 home buyers in a year, the money speaks for itself rather quickly.
Exactly.
I'm Bruce. This is and the people in the line. This is Walda. Yeah, Walda John. Just to piggyback what they have said is that in addition to the money that we can save then to serve more people in the community, also the difference is that we know the communities that we are serving. For example, in LEDC, our main population is the Latino community, but we serve all the communities. But we know how to work with them. We know how to work with Latinos. So we know how to work with first-time home buyers. That we know that they are very, very special population to work with. Or we know how to deal with homeowners that are in stress because they are facing foreclosure. So that is another talking point that agencies can use when they are trying to frame the work that they do with different agencies or governments or banks or any other potential funders. So it's really important that we mention that we know the communities that we work with.
Thank you so much. And I think trusted advisor and also independent are all things that have value to this conversation. We have run out of time. Thank you everybody for diving in. This will be an ongoing conversation with lots of these kinds of issues. Thank you very much everybody for your participation, especially to the panel.
And thanks
You're
to
welcome.
you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. And of course, don't forget to join NHRC. We need your support. We're out there every day working on trying to keep housing counseling alive and funded. All right, everybody have a good week or a couple weeks, and we'll be back with you on another Leaders Call soon.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.